I was standing in my tiny apartment at 2 in the morning, phone pressed to my ear, listening to a woman cry. A woman I'd never met. A woman whose husband had just left my bed an hour earlier. She said my name like a question, Ashley, like she'd been practicing how to say it, how to confront the person who'd been sleeping with her husband every Tuesday night for 2 months. My name is Ashley. I'm 33 years old. I live in Chicago. I work as a bartender at a place called Murphy's on the north side. Dark hair, tattoo on my shoulder, the kind of woman who doesn't apologize for taking up space. And I'm about to tell you something I've never told anyone, not even my closest friends. This is the story of how I became the other woman without even realizing I was making that choice. I was single when James walked into my life. Not just single, but the kind of single where you stop checking your phone, stop wondering if someone's going to text. I'd been through a bad breakup about 6 months before. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. So I threw myself into work, late shifts, double shifts, anything to keep my mind occupied. Murphy's is the kind of bar where regulars become furniture. You know their drink before they sit down. You know their stories, their complaints, their bad days at work. It's dark wood and dim lighting, old jazz playing on scratchy speakers, the smell of whiskey and lemon polish. I loved it there. Still do. James started coming in every Tuesday around 7 in the evening, always alone, always in a suit, dark gray or navy, tie loosened, just enough to show he'd had a long day. He had this tired smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, brown hair starting to gray at the temples, maybe late 30s, early 40s, nice hands. I always notice hands. He'd order a bourbon, neat, and sit at the end of the bar with his phone face down on the counter. Never looked at it. That was the first thing I noticed, actually. In a world where everyone's glued to their screens, he just sat there, present. The first few weeks, we barely talked. I'd pour his drink, he'd nod his thanks, and that was it. But there's something about bartending. You learn to read people. And I could tell he wanted to talk. He just didn't know how to start. So one Tuesday, it was raining outside, one of those cold Chicago rains that gets into your bones. I put his bourbon down and said something stupid about the weather. He looked up, surprised, and smiled. A real smile this time. He said, "You know, I've been coming here for a month and I don't even know your name." I told him, "Ashley." He repeated it, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. Then he introduced himself, James. We shook hands across the bar, and I felt this little spark. Nothing dramatic, just a warmth. From that night on, we talked. Started with safe things, the weather, the city, sports. Then it got deeper. He told me about his job in finance, how the pressure was crushing him, how he felt like he was drowning in spreadsheets and expectations. I told him about the bar, about the regulars, about wanting to write music someday, but never finding the time. He never mentioned a wife, never mentioned kids, never mentioned anything about a home life at all. And here's the thing, I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. There was something in the way he showed up every Tuesday, like clockwork, that told me he was escaping something. I just didn't want to be the one to name it. This went on for maybe 6 weeks. Every Tuesday, same time, same seat, same bourbon. But the conversations got longer. He started showing up earlier, leaving later. I'd catch him watching me while I worked, mixing drinks, talking to other customers. The way he looked at me, it wasn't creepy or aggressive, it was hungry. Not for my body, but for something I represented. Freedom, maybe. A life that wasn't whatever he was living outside that bar. I felt it too. This pull, this want. But I kept it professional, kept the bar between us like a safe boundary. Then one Tuesday in late September, he stayed until closing. It was just past midnight. Only a couple of stragglers left nursing their last drinks. James was still there, nursing his third bourbon. And when I announced last call, he didn't move. Everyone filed out slowly, and then it was just him and me. I started cleaning up, wiping down tables, stacking chairs. He got up and started helping me. I said, "You don't have to do that." He said, "I know. I want to." We worked in silence, this comfortable quiet that felt more intimate than any conversation we'd had. When I locked the front door and turned around, he was standing close, closer than he'd ever been. I could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive. He looked at me and said, "Coffee?" Just like that. One word. But we both knew what he was really asking. I could have said no, could have laughed it off, told him to go home, maintained that boundary. Instead, I looked right back at him and said, "I don't think either of us wants coffee, James." He smiled, the slow, knowing smile. "No," he said, "I don't think we do." We walked to his car in the parking lot. It was dark, empty, just the sound of distant traffic and our footsteps on wet pavement. The October air was cold enough to see our breath. He unlocked his car, a black sedan, something expensive and sensible. We got in. He turned to me, and for a moment, we just sat there, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. Then he leaned over and kissed me. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was certain, desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. I kissed him back, my hands in his hair, his hands on my waist, and everything else disappeared. When we broke apart, he looked at me and said, quote 7. His voice was rough, strained. I didn't ask why, didn't ask where home was or who was waiting for him there. I just said, quote 8. We drove in silence, parked outside my building. I lived in a small one-bedroom above a dry cleaner. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. We climbed the stairs, me fumbling with my keys, him right behind me, his hand on my lower back burning through my shirt. Inside, I turned on one lamp. The apartment was messy. Posters on the walls, books stacked everywhere, my guitar leaning against the couch. He looked around, taking it in, and said, quote 9. I turned to him. Quote 10. He went quiet, didn't answer. I walked over to him and reached up, loosening his tie, pulling it off slowly. "Don't talk about her here," I said. He closed his eyes. Ashley. The way he said my name, it was almost painful. I stepped closer, my hands on his chest. "Just you and me, right now. That's all this is." He opened his eyes and looked at me like I was air, and he'd been drowning. Then he kissed me again, and we didn't leave that apartment until morning. That first night changed everything. Not just physically, but something shifted between us. When he left the next morning, early, before the sun was fully up, he kissed me at the door and said, "Next Tuesday." I nodded. And that became our routine. Every Tuesday night, he'd come to the bar, stay until closing, help me clean up, and then we'd go to my apartment. We didn't talk about his life outside those walls. We didn't talk about what we were doing or what it meant. We just existed in this bubble, this separate reality where it was only us. The sex was intense, not just the physical part, but the way he looked at me, touched me, said my name, like I was the only real thing in his world. In my bedroom, with the city lights filtering through my curtains, he'd trace the tattoo on my shoulder and tell me I was beautiful. He'd talk about his dreams, the ones he'd given up on, the person he used to want to be before life got complicated. I'd listen, my head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat, and I'd tell him about the songs I wanted to write, the life I wanted to build. We were honest in those moments in a way I don't think either of us was anywhere else. But there were signs, little things I ignored because I wanted to. He never gave me his number, said it was complicated, that he'd always be the one to reach out. He never talked about his weekends, or his family, or his past. When I asked once about his job, about meeting for lunch sometime, he got this panicked look and said, "Work was crazy, maybe someday." I told myself it didn't matter, told myself I was independent, that I didn't need more than this. But the truth is, I knew, somewhere deep down, I knew he was married. I just didn't want to say it out loud because saying it would make it real, and making it real would mean I had to make a choice. This went on for 2 months, 8 Tuesday nights, 8 mornings watching him leave, 8 weeks of living in this fantasy where the real world didn't exist. I started looking forward to Tuesdays like nothing else mattered. The other 6 days were just filler, just waiting. I'd catch myself smiling at work, humming while I mixed drinks, and my coworker Maria would tease me, say I had that glow. I'd laugh it off, but she was right. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Then one Wednesday afternoon in early December, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I hate spam calls, but something made me pick up. I said hello. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, shaky, trying to be strong. She said, "Is this Ashley?" My stomach dropped. I knew. Immediately, I knew. I said yes. She said, "I'm calling about my husband, James." The world tilted. I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, silent. She kept talking. Her voice was breaking, but she was trying so hard to keep it together. She said, "I know you've been seeing him. I know about Murphy's Bar. I know about your apartment. I know you work late shifts, and he comes to you every Tuesday night." Each sentence was a punch. I wanted to hang up, to deny it, to scream that she had it wrong. But I couldn't, because she didn't have it wrong. She told me everything. They'd been married for 12 years. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, ages 9 and 6. They lived in Evanston, in a house with a yard and a dog. She'd suspected something was wrong for months. He was distant, distracted, always finding excuses to work late on Tuesdays. So she followed him one night, sat outside the bar in her car and watched him go in, watched him stay until closing, watched him leave with me. She knew where I lived because she'd followed us that night, sat outside my building until he left in the morning. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to the wife of the man you've been sleeping with? She started crying then, really crying, and said, quote, 18? Her words gutted me. 2 kids? He had 2 kids and he never said a word, never mentioned their names or their ages or that they existed at all. I found my voice. It came out steadier than I felt. I said, quote, 19. She went quiet, like she was surprised I wasn't fighting her, wasn't making excuses. I said, quote, 20. It was a weak defense, pathetic even, but it was all I had. She said, quote, 21. I thought about that. Honestly, thought about it. And I said, quote, 22. At least I gave her honesty. We hung up. I sat there on my couch for an hour, maybe more, just staring at the wall. Then I blocked James's number, deleted every text we'd ever exchanged. took the bourbon glass he'd left on my nightstand the night before and washed it, put it away, tried to erase him from my space. That Tuesday, he came to the bar like always, walked in at 7, suit and tie, that tired smile. He sat at his usual spot and looked at me. I didn't go over. I had Maria take his section. He sat there for 2 hours, nursing one bourbon, watching me move around the bar, trying to catch my eye. I never looked at him. Not once. He came back the next Tuesday. Same thing. Sat there, waited, watched. I didn't approach him, didn't acknowledge him. Maria asked me what was going on, why I was avoiding the Tuesday regular. I told her it was complicated, asked her to keep covering that section. He left that night without finishing his drink. The third Tuesday, he didn't show up. I kept looking at the door, expecting him to walk in, but he never did. Part of me was relieved. Part of me felt this ache, this loss that made no sense, because what did I really lose? A man who was never mine, a fantasy, a Tuesday night escape. I thought about calling his wife, telling her he'd stopped coming around, that it was over. But what would be the point? She didn't need to hear from me again. She needed to rebuild her life with her husband, if that's what she chose to do. I thought about James too, wondered if he went home and fought for his marriage, or if he just found another bar, another bartender, another Tuesday night escape. I wondered if he missed me, or if I was already forgotten, just another mistake in a long line of mistakes. The truth is, I'll never know. And maybe that's better. What I do know is this. For 2 months, I was the other woman. I was the secret, the escape, the place he went when his real life became too much. And I let myself believe it was something more because believing that was easier than admitting I was participating in someone else's betrayal. His wife's betrayal, his kids' betrayal, my own betrayal of the woman I thought I was. I still work at Murphy's, still do the late shifts, still mix drinks for regulars and listen to their stories. But I don't let myself get attached anymore. Don't let conversations go too deep. Don't let that spark of connection turn into something it shouldn't. Tuesday nights feel different now, quieter, emptier. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the end of the bar, at that seat where James used to sit, and I remember the way he'd look at me across the crowd. That tired smile, that desperate need. I think about that phone call a lot. His wife's voice, breaking but strong. The way she begged me to give back what was never really mine. And I think about what she asked me. Would it have mattered if I'd known about the kids? I told her I didn't know. But lying here at night, alone in the apartment where he used to stay, until morning, I think I have my answer. Maybe it would have mattered. Maybe I would have stopped it before it started. Or maybe I would have done exactly what I did. Told myself it wasn't my responsibility to protect his marriage, that his choices were his own. Maybe I would have been exactly who I was. A woman who took what she wanted and didn't ask the hard questions because she didn't want to hear the answers. So here's what I'm left with. I'm 33 years old, working the same bar, living the same life, but carrying this new weight. The knowledge that I can be that person, the other woman, the secret, the reason someone else cries into the phone at 2 in the morning. I'm not proud of it. But I'm not drowning in guilt either. I made my choices, he made his. And somewhere in Evanston, his wife made hers too. We all did what we thought we needed to do to survive, to feel something, to escape whatever it was we were running from. I still have that tattoo on my shoulder, still play guitar on my nights off, still make bourbon neat without asking because some habits are hard to break. And sometimes, on Tuesday nights when the bar's quiet and the jazz is playing low, I wonder if James thinks about me too, wonders what I'm doing, if I'm okay, if I ever think about those mornings in my apartment when the world felt smaller and safer and just for us. I wonder if he tells himself it meant something, or if he's convinced himself it was nothing, just a blip, just a moment of weakness. But mostly, I wonder this: was I his lover, or was I just his escape from everything real in his life? Was what we had something worth all the damage it caused? And the answer, the one I hate admitting, is that I don't think it was. I think I was a Tuesday night fantasy, a place he went to forget who he really was. And he was the same for me. We were two people using each other to avoid our own truths. His truth was that his marriage was broken. Mine was that I was terrified of letting anyone get close enough to actually know me. So that's my story. That's what happened when I became the other woman without meaning to. Or maybe while meaning to all along. I don't have a lesson for you. I don't have advice or wisdom or some moral to wrap this up in a neat bow. I just have the truth of what happened, the reality of those 8 Tuesday nights, and the sound of his wife's voice asking me to give back what I never really had. Make of it what you will.